Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ariel Tseekwe Deranger, and I'm the Executive Director of Indigenous Climate Action, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We're really excited to talk about the RedTide Climate Action Summit happening this May in Aotearoa, in partnership with the Pacific Peoples Partnership as well as the Toi Toi Manu Trust. We're really excited to talk about this climate summit that's has a really strong youth component and how youth can get involved. And we really want to start things off by welcoming our local hosts coming into all the way from across the globe in New Zealand, joining us today. And we're really excited to welcome Ora Barlow Tukaki and Roy Tukaki, the directors of Toi Toi Manawa Trust. So Ora is a professional musician that for over 30 years performed in hundreds of festivals, events, and workshops worldwide with bands such as Pacific Curls, Manu Huri, and Planet Woman. She's a facilitator and teacher and has traveled the globe. And she currently teaches and works in her tribal home community in Te Wanua Paunui. And Ray, her husband, represents New Zealand in the New Zealand Dragon Boat team, and he travels around the globe and has mentored, inspired, and trained many young people, corporations, and adults in Dragon Boats teams. He has a long history working with communities, supporting families, and working in the security field. They both care deeply for their community and sit on land trusts as well as tribal committees. Together, this husband and wife team bring to their community outstanding artists and events, and they are beautiful activists that are really standing up not just for climate justice in their territory, but for really doing that intergenerational exchange and making sure that youth are brought into the fold. So I want to say thank you, Musi Cho, to Ora and Ray, who may be joining us shortly. We're not sure. He's trying to make his way over here right away. But Ora is going to talk a little bit more about what to expect at the summit and what the summit's all about, and really show us a little bit of the territory that we would be going to if you're able to come to the summit and why we should come to the summit. So with that, I really want to hand it off to Ora to welcome us to this webinar today. Thank you, Ora.
Kia ora, Ariel, and ngā mihi kia koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora, everybody. I'm Ora. There's my beautiful darling over here, Ray.
Kia ora.
And we are sitting in our home in the tribal lands of the Whanau Apunui, which is pretty much the centre of paradise for us and hopefully for you when you come and visit us on the 1st to the 6th of May for RedTide. We want to tell you a little bit about our tribal area. And Te Whanau Apunui is clustered in between a number of other different tribes. We have 13 sub-tribes, and within that there are probably about 12 to 13,000 ancestor uri, descendants that come from our ancestor. But here in our tribal lands, we live in a very narrow coastal strip, right on the sea and also surrounded by mountains. And there's probably about 1,500 of us that live here in Te Whanau Apunui, and so we have the saying that there are 1,500 leaders as well, so it makes for a very dynamic meeting. So what we have here is we're very rural. We live probably about an hour away from any township. We are very traditional. We've retained our languages. We've retained the ownership of our lands. We own probably about 97% of our lands. We are very staunch and very hearty and very coasty. So when you come, you're going to learn a whole heap of different lingo that's going to be just a beautiful addition to your language already. And half the time we don't understand each other, but we just nod our heads or raise our eyebrows. That's kind of the best way to just kind of get in with the locals. So the other part of Te Whanau Apunui is that each area has a marae. And a marae is a meeting house, a communal space, which often will house any community event like funerals, like hui's meetings like this, events like this. And it's an open communal space that's looked after by each sub-tribe. And they each have their different kinds of protocol. And so when you come to Te Whanau Apunui, there's all sorts of kind of protocol that we are really looking forward to introducing you to. Things like being called onto a marae, the protocol of where you are, because you're going to be walking into the house of our ancestors. Things such as that, how we speak, how we conduct ourselves on the marae, all those kind of really cultural exchanges that we can do, and we're really looking forward to sharing that with you. The other thing as part of a marae communal space is that it is a communal space. So it's one large room with a whole heap of mattresses that you get to sleep on if you want us to accommodate you, if you're coming from afar and you need somewhere to stay. So the best way to make sure that that happens good is to register on our redtidesummit.com site. And in that, it will ask you if you want to have some accommodation. When you come and accommodate, you need to bring your sleeping bag, bring some earplugs because there's bound to be a snorer in the room, and also some, things to cover your eyes if you're kind of an early riser or late, an early sleeper or an early riser. So, yeah, those are just some of the things that are really good. But now we move into the RedTide space. And RedTide is being hosted by 3 of our marae. So we have Pahoa Mirai, Maungaro Mirai, a whānau and families, and Te Ehutu. And kia ora to the sister Hannah there that's just joined us. So Pahoa Mirai is a space that is going to be hosting the youth conference, and we have 2 days of the youth conference from the 1st to the 2nd. Now the youth conference is targeted at our 15 to 18-year-olds, but it's not limited because we have a young under 5-year-old tents that when you bring your children you can come and play there. We've got an art space that will be open to all ages, carvers symposium, a creative art space, weaving spaces, and sewing spaces. So that's kind of happening in one space. And then we've got our young people, and we call our young people rangatahi. And this 2-day conference has been a really deliberate kind of thinking part of us as the core team around how do we build our capacity, how do we create succession, how do we create community resilience. And part of that is building our young people and investing into our young people. So for the 2 days, we have these incredible experts, these amazing community facilitators and leaders that are coming in to work and workshop. So the first day is like GIS Google mapping. It's connecting our elders' knowledge with our young people's savvy devices. They click that together. They can say, here's used to be a traditional, or here is the traditional fishing spot. Our young mob can stick it on the GIS Google map, and then they have the story that goes with that. So it's all about reconnecting. So when we call it climate change, we actually are calling about reconnecting, because everything is about our relationships with each other. Relationship to our lands, to our seas, to our mountains, to our sky, to our knowledge, to each other, to different cultures. And within that framework happens what we make towards change. And in this instance, our theme is around the climate. So we've got 2 days of youth conference. We've got spoken word, we've got leadership, we've got digital sort of media workshops, we've got ecology workshops, just a whole range of things. And it's limited, so you have to register. And we're only limited because of the resource of the space. So register your interest and your name, and we will get you here, and be amazing to embrace you in the bosom of Te Whānau Apanui. So you go from the 2-day youth conference, and then you move into the 4-day summit. And again, everything is about protocol. So we do another welcome ceremony. So we've done a welcome ceremony for the youth conference. Now we've moved to another marae, another sub-tribe just down the road, and we're all related. And then we move into that space, and that's the big summit. And from that youth conference, they would have learnt some traditional stick welcome protocol, which is called Maurako. And so that youth summit will then welcome the rest of the delegation in. So it's all about integrating culture, relationships, experiences, and making spaces for all our experiences and expertise, because all of us that are going to be there are all community leaders. We're all community action and activators, and it's to honour that as well. Not only just to bring other expertise from outside, but to honour the expertise that comes to the conference. And so we've got a wide range of topics, from Indigenous sciences to white science to community leader, community resilience programs, to our global partners, our global alliances, what the people are doing out there, drawing on our young people, our elders, and all of us that live and breathe in the space of relationship work. And we live and breathe this work of being really caring of what's going on, how we're noticing that the climate is definitely impacting upon what we are and who we are, and how it affects our traditional resourcing, how it affects our industries, how it affects our community resilience, how it affects our day-to-day life. This is happening right now, and so we have to get ready, get activated, and get know what's going on, prepare for what's going to go on, and then do what's going to go on. You know, we've got to just do these steps of action. And so the whole thoughtfulness around RedTide, and it is so many people, too many to mention, that have kind of really put it in their expertise and their knowledge and their experiences of conferences and events and being on the front line of what it is that's going to be the thing that's going to be the bolt of lightning, that's going to be the Frankenstein factor. You know, we all need a Frankenstein factor. We need this, we build, but what's going to be that bolt that's just going to charge and make it living and make it part of who we are. And so you know, we just want to give our thanks to all of those people. So many people have been part of our think tanks, a part of our core alliance team, a part of all of our sponsors and supporters that have all been inputting in their expertise and their knowledge. And lastly, I just want to say that you know, without, you know, who Toi Manawa Trust is is driven by myself and my husband, but it is a tribal space. We link in really interconnected with all of our tribal spaces here, from our tribal authorities to our sub-tribe committees to our land blocks to our people that are just going to be on the ground helping us. And so a huge big thank to Te Whānau Apunui whānau, our family that are always backing us with all the kind of events that we do, that always come on board and are phenomenal and make what we do appear easy and seamless, but it's because they make it easy. And so, you know, I think if there's any questions, you know, please just send us a message, a line. We are really looking forward to hosting this event. It is the first, not the first definitely of climate change and of Indigenous people and what they've done, but the first RedTide. And what we hope as an alliance is to create a legacy. These legacy pieces. Everything is about what we leave and how we create resilience. And so what are the messaging? It's not just coming to a conference and having an incredible time. It's about what we leave as a legacy and what we create as resilience together. And so part of that legacy is saying RedTide is there to be hosted by anyone after this. If you want RedTide, here comes a collection of people that can come with that to help you to template that, to frame it that suits your community and bring it to you, so that we are sharing our expertise. We're not reinventing the wheel, but we're just making it, saying these are all these experts that have done it before our time, that are doing it in our time, and are going to be doing it in the future. And let's create that pathway, let's create that footpath so that we can find strength in our community and that we are building together. So, ngā mihi kia koutou. Thank you so much for joining us, or if you catch us later on the record. We want to introduce you to another really significant member of our family. This is Cassius, and we've got 3 good dogs. They keep us safe on our lands. They catch rats, possums, stoats, all those kind of nasty kind of pests that we have down here. And this is a little bit of a look in our area, right on the sea, waiting for you We've got so many things to share, our cultural food, our cultural dances and songs, and most of all, we've got us. And so we look forward to seeing you, meeting you, and sharing with you about RedTide. Kia ora.
Thank you, Ora. That you just painted such a beautiful picture of what the summit's going to be like. All of this beautiful space, communal sharing and meals and sleeping and art spaces. You know, I think it's so critical that we don't just talk about how we can challenge and stop things, but to take that time to create beauty and reconnect ourselves with culture. And I just love how you framed climate change is just about reconnecting, because a lot of the time here in North America, we've had these discussions around how we frame climate change and how climate change doesn't really resonate with Indigenous communities, and that the words just seem very foreign and very colonial in their nature, and that it's actually about like this reconnection to land. It's about looking at the environment and climate as something that's part of us. And so when we talk about rebalancing atmospheric carbon in the atmosphere, we also need to be talking about rebalancing our spirits and our cultures and our identity and connection. And so I'm so excited by this conference and how beautiful it sounds. And I just want to thank you for opening your territory to the people to come, because I think that this can be a really groundbreaking event that I'm just so excited and so happy that Indigenous Climate Action can offer the support to try and get the word out there and really try and get some folks from over here to come over there, because our struggles as Indigenous people are one and the same, whether it's in North America, New Zealand, Australia, all over parts of Asia, Africa, South America. We're all one people with that connection to land. So thank you so much, Ora. The next I'd like to welcome April, who will give us, April Ingham, who is the Executive Director of the Pacific Peoples Partnership, and she's going to give us a little bit of a history of RedTide and where it came from. But April's the Executive Director of the PPP, or Pacific Peoples Partnership, and she's helped to oversee multi-year CETA-funded projects in civil society, conflict transformation in Manawa in West Papua, including the development of women's networks and cooperatives. She's also assisted in the development of communications, water security, and economic strategies along the Sepik River region of Papua New Guinea, hosted and helped produce 4 major Pacific conferences, and produced public engagement programs that connect Indigenous peoples of Canada and the South Pacific, while opening space for all that care about the Pacific concerns. She also sits on the board of Canadian Council for International Cooperation, and is an advisor to the School of Technology and Education at the Royal Roads University. She has done so much over her years. You can read her full profile on the RedTide Summit page, but I want to welcome April, who really has pulled us together and connected us to Ora and Ray, and really sort of helped bud this relationship together to really talk about where RedTide came from and the history. And, you know, she has such an extensive history of doing this type of work, and we're so honored to be able to work alongside April. So thank you so much, April, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Ariel. That is such a lovely introduction. And hello, everybody out there in broadcast, Facebook, internet land. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm talking to you today live from Sauk Nation territories on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, in what is known as, I don't know, Canada and those other terms. But basically, our organization, Pacific Peoples Partnership, has been in Victoria for 42 plus years. We started in the days of nuclear testing in the South Pacific, and we fought against that. And we've been an advocacy and awareness and education organization since the start, really focused on bringing awareness to what's happening in the South Pacific. And as you know, climate change is really adversely affecting so many people in the South Pacific. So it's a really critical area of focus for our work here in Canada. What's really unique about our organization is that we work to create networks and link Indigenous peoples together for knowledge sharing, for building solidarity, for addressing some of the challenges that so many of us face within our communities. We look to share best practices, to look at some of the challenges we're all facing, and to see what innovations are out there within traditional knowledge and also within the science that's emerging. So we're really open into looking at all the best solutions and bringing people that are looking forward to become part of a real global, community of sharing and solidarity building. So we're really thrilled to be part of this work. As you had mentioned, I've had the pleasure to be involved in coordinating four major Pacific events for networking and conferencing and sharing. And one of the last ones that we put on was in 2015. And that one was called Rising Tides, Our Lands, Our Waters, Our Peoples. And it was the second major conference I'd put on in that vein. And it was to bring together people from all corners of the Pacific and throughout, all the different communities that are interested in working in solidarity together to share. And what was really unique about the last, iteration of our Pacific Networking Conference, of which we've had 23 in our history, was the fact that in working out some of the round circling and discussing some of the ideas of what we wanted to do with that space, we discussed the idea of bringing it out of the classroom, out of the typical conference setting of sitting at the university and just being in our stools and spending a whole day there, and really radically rethinking what the conference and the sharing could be. And one of our partners in that work was Indigenous Governance, who hopefully you'll hear from shortly at the University of Victoria. And part of the work they are doing with Resurgence, that I'm sure they'll chat about as well, is getting into community and being with community and sharing, in all different ways, whether it be north-south or just even, within the region. So what we did with their support and with the support of the local nations in the Southern Vancouver Island area, is we brought the conference into the communities for a day of sharing in 3 different communities. And then the 4th day was a day of festival and celebration within the city of Victoria. But within each of those communities, we spent a day, for instance, in Sauk Nations, learning about green energy initiatives, touring their green economic industries that they're developing, looking at their solar installation projects, learning about the philosophies that have guided the development of this, and hearing some inspirational stories of how they've gone about this work in working with youth and elders. And then another day was spent in Sartlip territories, spending time with people that have helped to bring back traditional carving forms and teach them within the communities, and the revitalization of Indigenous languages. So looking at some of the innovations and solutions and the hard work being done by communities to address some of the challenges that so many Indigenous peoples face. And the whole proceedings was like that, and hosted at Songhees Nation and also Esquimalt Nation, and great big festivals and feasts and sharing in all different ways. And it was such an incredible experience, and we had the most wonderful attendee at this, amongst many, of course. But Aura came and she presented, and the day that she presented was when we were in the Sartlip territories. We had a room full of elders there having lunch with us, and we were having soup and bannock, and Aura came up, and I'd known her as a performer and a songwriter and amazing, just presence overall. But to hear her speak about what was happening in her community, to hear her talk about how their tribal communities came together and basically pushed out deep sea mining in their territories by putting the blockade in of kayaks and canoes and all of the movement that they did. It was so inspiring, and everyone in Sartlip, the elders, were like so happy to hear this story and so inspired by that, and also by her everything she presented that day. And it was shortly after that we had a chance to really discuss, some of the visions that her and her community have. And one of those visions was to host an international climate change summit for Indigenous peoples. So that presented a wonderful opportunity for Pacific Peoples Partnership to look at getting the conference that we were putting on historically for over 23, biannual conferences, and to, working on a different model. And so we were really thrilled to go into partnership with Toi Toi Manawa Trust and with the communities in their tribal areas to put on this RedTide conference. And so PPP, our our involvement has been more along the lines of guidance and bringing people together and support and assistance wherever we can. And we're just so thrilled, though, that as a small organization, that working in partnership, which is the heart of how we do our work, that we were able to bring great partners like Indigenous governance and like your association, the Indigenous Climate Action group, to come together and to work together for such an important cause that affects so many people worldwide. And just we're thrilled to be part of this, and we're also thrilled to see that we're all working towards creating a legacy, and that legacy is in our youth and in our solidarity and in the actions to come. So we are thrilled to be part of this, and we thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, April, for that really strong overview. The really important thing is that we are Indigenous people leading ourselves, and that we are talking about ways of growing and knowing and working together to really build our people up. Years of colonization, whether in New Zealand or Canada or the United States or wherever, as Indigenous peoples, we need to really be building each other up and really working together to find those strategies across those colonial borders that have separated our people. I know that there are histories of the Pacific people trading with the coastal people of North America long before colonization started here. And it's so wonderful to bridge those gaps in our trading and our cultures and our sharing of things. And so to have this event is just such a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful opportunity for so many people. And again, part of this webinar isn't just to talk about RedTide and the summit, but to talk about where it's going to be and what you're going to see and all the wonderful things that will happen once you're there. One of the things that we did want to show you is a short video of the territory in which we're going to see if you attend the conference, and then we'll get into how you can apply to come on out to this conference as a young person. Again, as Cora said, there's limited space, so we want people to register. If you have the means to come, please register right away. Go to RedTide. We'll get that link up on the Facebook page. You can go to the RedTide Climate Action Summit website, where we also have a RedTide Facebook page that you can join for some updates if you like Facebook as a more way of communicating. And then we have some other opportunities that I'll get to, but I wanted to share this really great video from the territory and from RedTide that gives you a little bit of an idea of what you'll see if you do make your way out here. So I'm going to open my screen to start sharing, and I will show you this video. I just wanted to share that beautiful video to get and excited about the beauty that exists down there. And you know, one of the things that's so interesting when we see these types of videos is that there's so much of the landscape that looks so similar to where we are, and it really makes you feel like the world is such a small place, because our territories can be very, very similar, even though they're in totally different hemispheres on opposite ends of the planet. We all have that connection to Mother Earth, and we all have the same sort of lands and territories that we're fighting to protect, that we're looking to preserve through our culture, the strength of the ancestors' knowledges that have been passed down through generations. So I'm not sure, we were hoping to have a youth join us. I'm not sure, Aura, was the youth delegate able to join us? Great. So we wanted to give some opportunity. I don't know, Aura, if you want to introduce the youth delegate. Oh, there you are. I don't know, Aura, do you want to do an introduction?
Oh, kia ora everyone. Hannah, I reckon you will do the best introduction for yourself ever in the world. So we're just going to hand it over to you, the beautiful Hannah.
Kia ora koutou, ko manga kia ki te manga, ko waitamata te moana, ko mahuhu ki te rangi te waka, ko ngā te whātua, ngai te rangi tainui ngā iwi, ko hana mai hia ho. Sorry, I've got a bit of a rowdy dog just barking in the background. But I'm part of an Indigenous youth collective that banded together basically around mobilising youth voices in climate change discussions. And so we, last year, got together, put out the call to see who would want to go to the COP23 climate change talks over in Germany, Bonn. We crowdsourced our funding using a crowdfunding platform, all with the mission of, I guess, being youth-led for youth in the climate change discussions at an international level, and had a very eye-opening experience with our group. If I could just speak a little bit about our purpose and vision, I guess just a bit of background. It was my first climate change international conference experience was over in Morocco, COP23, where we ended up having a NZ or New Zealand delegation take a whole bunch of young people over. So I was an Indigenous voice amongst a New Zealand delegation, but found actually that was quite isolating, and I wasn't able to really share and articulate the experience, and break it down in a way that I could understand as an Indigenous woman. What was the impact of climate change on and climate change policy on my immediate local community? So following that, a couple of us had a discussion around, well, how do we mobilise these voices? We ended up creating the Indigenous Youth Working Group and the COP COI, there's so many acronyms, but the Conference of Youth space. And that really was the beginning of this discussion around what does solidarity look like amongst our Indigenous youth communities. And so, that was really exciting. We had a small group of us that banded together, but from that started this conversation around how do we build capacity in our own time, on our own terms, amongst our Indigenous communities around the globe. The local response and responsibility of doing that was actually to come back to New Zealand the following year and realise actually we need to be building the capacity to make sure that there's a presence and make sure there's a group that are looking out solely for Indigenous rights, but also, I guess, within a New Zealand context, the rights of our Indigenous people and the people of the Pacific within these negotiations. So yeah, that was our mana motu hake, or our stand of sovereignty was forming, I guess, in the absence of having any reason or any specific support for Indigenous youth to attend these conferences. So we did that, and we had a number of supporters, community supporters, but also organisations that not only helped us with accreditation and getting badges to attend, but also they were instrumental in making sure that we could have a presence and have a voice there. I guess if there's anything I can share that might be of relevance is what Order and our previous speakers have talked about is, how do we, what's the legacy that we're a part of, and what are we leaving behind in terms of building that resilience within our communities, and certainly giving youth a chance to see what's happening at a global picture and to see the connection of those policies and also the inaction that's happening and the immediate impact on our frontline communities, our frontline Indigenous communities, I think is one of those lightning bolt moments that Order was talking about. And it's one of those moments that for us as individuals really drills home the urgency and the importance of our generation actually understanding the ramifications of what climate change is going to do to our livelihoods of our Indigenous communities around the world. So yeah, that urgency we definitely felt and wanted to also respond in real time within the conference, to use our platform to give voice to the voiceless, and to highlight the lack of meaningful engagement of Indigenous voices within those colonial spaces. And so part of our strategy and learning was actually splitting our team into two groups, which one followed the formal negotiations and one that was more so focused around the community space and actions pretty much. So yeah, that was part of our learning, was actually staging an action called Pass the Mic, which is about creating spaces for the voices that actually, the marginalized voices that need to be heard. And part of, this was just, I guess, an insight into the ad hoc capacity building that we were having to do, because what we found was, especially in New Zealand, we don't have a lot of formal spaces that actually build that capacity for us to be able to engage and negotiate with confidence in these kind of forums. And so a lot of it was self-taught, but even being able to see how other groups, so not necessarily Indigenous, but other youth groups, how the level to which they are mobilised and organised and sharing resources and capacity was a huge learning to see how far we've got to go and getting our young people actually meaningfully engaging in these discussions and in this topic. But just to draw the point back to what our previous speakers have talked about, is realizing that these spaces, for many of us, we realize these spaces were never designed for us to thrive. So very much that grassroots action and the importance of having summits like RedTide, I think that's what we realize is important in terms of putting our energy into as young people. So yeah, we're really excited to be supporting our collective to be supporting the hard work that's gone into hosting and putting together RedTide, and we hope that that can be, I guess, grow into something that might be of the magnitude that we see with the COP climate change talks, and that it be, Indigenous-led, Indigenous-framed, and that ecosystem of thought leadership, that ecosystem of climate change action, give rise to the leadership within our youth that's sitting there and ready to be activated. I'll just touch on our demands. So yeah, we went over with a couple of things, which was to find out, one, what's happening at this international space, how is it connecting to local communities and grassroots action. Two, to amplify the voice of Indigenous people. And three, build connections amongst the Indigenous community so we can actually start to take ownership of how we share and exchange those learnings and resources. So just a plug is that we are, as a collective, having started this journey by ourselves, we're really wanting to support any youth out there, wherever they may be, if they want to get to climate change talks or to summits like RedTide. We want to be able to help support those young people to be able to do that, and in any way, form, and also just connect at a digital level of creating that digital community. Some of our demands also included demanding that our climate policy here in New Zealand be conducted in accordance with UNDRIP. So just actually tying together all these international Indigenous community, Indigenous spaces and forums, there's still some inconsistency across that level. Our government having to support the structure and implementation of Indigenous peoples and local communities platform, which was the core focus of the Indigenous caucus within the climate change talks. And for our governments to recognise, support and service peoples who are displaced by impacts of climate change. So particularly in the Pacific, what we're seeing is our Pacific brothers and sisters are, they're on the front line. Their islands and their homes are immediately under threat. And New Zealand is looking to be the host of a lot of those displaced people. So actually being able to realise our role as Indigenous people and how we extend our manaakitanga or our care to these oncoming visitors. That's a discussion that we think needs to be prioritised so that Indigenous people aren't just reacting, but we're actually being able to intentionally respond to how we can service others in connection to our lands and our waters. And one of our final demands was respecting Indigenous knowledge and protecting and maintaining these bodies of knowledge through local-based mechanisms, requiring greater effort and resources to be focused into revitalising these Indigenous reference points that Ora was talking about. So, the connection and relationship we have to our rivers, to our mountains, the environmental indicators that our kids can be learning about as they monitor their ecosystems. These are all very important, but in these climate change conferences, they're very scarce to come across. So I think having that Indigenous knowledge actually put at the forefront, as our people, our ancestors have been doing climate change action or sustainable living for generations, and so for that to be recognised and for colonisation to be recognised as a root cause of why climate change is an issue is actually a discussion or it's a concept and a topic that our collective really wanted to see brought to the fore, and we definitely saw it as absent from the COP23 discussions. So I won't take up any more time, but We have a Facebook group, which I can link in the webinar. I don't know if there's a platform. We are looking to reconnect with more groups. We know that they're out there that are doing community and schools education work. And we're also wanting to link and support people to be able to attend summits like RedTide. So nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you so much for that, Hannah. I think that there's just so many similarities in the issues that we do. I actually started a lot of my international work on Indigenous rights at the Permanent Forum in the early 2000s, and I was sitting on the Indigenous Youth Caucus, and we became a recognized caucus by the UN Secretariat, and it was such a pivotal moment as Indigenous youth from all over the world. And it was one of those moments that really opened my eyes to the fact that our struggles are so deeply connected and our young people have such interesting roles to play, because we are often the sort of first generations that are living outside of the very, very oppressive state. So we now have sort of the shackles have been removed. A lot of our parents were part of stolen generations or residential schools or boarding school programs, or they had no voting rights in their countries and so on and so forth. So our young people have a really, really fundamental role in bringing forward not just the ideas to address climate change, but the ideas and the solutions that they sort of utilize. Like as Indigenous people, when we speak, we don't speak about ourselves in singularities. We speak with the knowledge of our ancestors behind us. And it's so powerful and amazing to see young people continuing to carry these torches and do the work that you're doing, Hannah. So I just want to say, Masicho, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. So as we're nearing the end of this webinar, one of the things that I wanted to do was I was going to share my screen, and I was offered Aura back to the stage, as I call it, to talk a little bit more about how people can register. So I'm going to share the RedTide page, the web page, and we can talk a little bit about how people can register at the registration process, which you did talk about, but I just want to share the page and maybe we can just go over how people can do this. So Aura, I will share my screen so people can see the RedTide page. And if you want to share a little bit about how people can register and just about the program, and maybe I'll go a little bit over that.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Hannah and Ariel and April. Amazing to share this platform and this space to share just all of our experiences, and also the incredible kind of focus that we're starting to draw these experts into our field around RedTide. So RedTide, you'll kind of see redtidesummit.com. Just click on there, and it's a fairly easy navigatable website there. The one aspect about our registration is, and one intentional thing that we've done, is that we've made it by donation. And often these kind of summits have got a huge price tag attached to them, because obviously there are quite big costs associated. And the reason that we wanted to do that was because we wanted to make far more work than what we needed to do. No, it's not that. What we wanted to do was make it accessible to everybody, which meant that, again, we had to really walk our talk around relationships. So creating relationships with our sponsors, funders, with our people. And so you can donate money, is great, is fantastic. We love the dollar. The other thing you can also donate is your time. During the summit, we've got really essential core costs that we have to cover, because we are providing you with 3 meals and accommodation, and communal accommodation. And so those core costs come, obviously with a lot of resourcing that we have to do. We have caterers, we have, luckily our marae can cater for sort of large numbers, but we have people that are on the ground doing that. We've got the food that needs to go on your plate. We've got the marquees that need to house our conferencing. We've got skills that we actually have to reimburse for, the keynote speakers that we have to look after, some of our international guests that are coming over as well. So all these kind of core costs that your donation will help during the registration. So you jump on the registration form. It's a very simple form. Really, we just want to know, are you fabulous? Are you hot? And where do you come from? And that probably just answers all of that. And also just the contact, so that we can create a database that can support just this communication round that we want to create, this community of communication. And so very easy. See in the bottom there it says koha, donate. Koha is this act of giving. So we create a cycle of generosity, and this is also about our relationships. So how do we create a cycle of generosity? When you come, it's about helping out in the kitchen. It's about, sometimes you might have to go and wash the toilets. It's not about just sitting there passively, receiving all the incredible experiences that you're going to have, but it's also about what you also give in turn, so that we keep this whole cycle of generosity and create these relationships that create just a really good template for us to move away from. So it's not incredible difficult. It's not like asking for what was your great grandmother's name and where did she come from, and does that fit into our profile? No, everybody is welcome. The focus has an Indigenous framework, but all of our people, all of our alliances, our allies, our relationship partners, our sponsors, everyone is welcome to RedTide. And again, it's just always reiterating the cycle of generosity. So the program what you're seeing on screen now is not the this one that you're seeing is the trick program. The real program is coming up at the end of March, but this one's just to kind of give you a little teaser to go, yeah, there's something cool happening, but we're not going to tell you yet. And so we've pretty much about 3/4 of the way confirming all our keynote speakers. You can see that is a really potentially going to be a really big summit. So we have in the morning, we have our kind of speakers that are speaking to our minds and our hearts around from constellation star to coastal inundation. Our scientists talking about the ecology impact. Facilitators talking around the community and cultural impact, the loss of, because of the way that climate change works. We have, again, we're saying, these arts workspaces. But in the morning, we have this kind of these headspace, heart space keynote speakers. In the afternoon, we move into our interactive sessions. And these interactive sessions is, how do we get the knowledge that we're hearing into our hands? How do we get it into the space of action? And so these kind of things are really the connectivity. What connects our head and our heart is also our spirit. And so all these sort of cycles are moving around relationship, connectivity, that we don't bombard you with an overload of information. So there are other things going on. If you just want to step out of the summit, there's kind of an arts thing happening at the same time. So we're creating a village. And it is this thing, what we grew up with as Māori on the marae, is that when you're sitting in the wharenui, in the main house of the people, it's the large house which you sleep in. There are so many things that happen when if one person is standing and speaking, there are probably about 300 other things that are happening in that room at the same time. Like somebody might be whispering to each other and talking about something that may be related to what the speaker's saying or not. Somebody else is sleeping and having a good old snore. Kids are playing on the floor. Other people are getting up and down. It's a space that's communal, and it's a space that's about creating the generosity of space for people to do what they feel they need to do. And so within that part of how to stylize that within a summit, there's obviously really scheduled sessions, but there's also some open forum sessions where what might organically come out of the conference might be happening. We can allow some of that space. We've created the space to bring that to the fore, so that we try not to lose anything. We'll have a big, in the art space, we'll have a big sheet that people can write their thoughts and their notes, because sometimes people don't want to say it out loud, but they can write it. Or some people want to put it in their artwork. So we've got a master carver that's doing 3 totems that we're going to be gifting back to the marae. the three marae, and there he's working with a community of artists, whoever turns up, and they work on those three totems, those three po, which is part of our legacy gift back. So there's all these, it's the space that anything and everything should happen. You know, again, this Frankenstein factor. You don't really know how Frankenstein's going to act, but you just know you got to give it life. And so how do you help to guide it? How do you help to give it enough information so we all make the right choices in that? And hopefully make it an experience that you will remember and want to give back to your community. Kia ora.
Thank you so much. You know, you just painted such a beautiful picture of what the summit's going to look like. So the registration process is super easy. I just want to stress, like, if you can't go to this conference, but you really believe in supporting it, you can go to the RedTide page and donate. So donate to make sure that they can provide all the food and pay all of the cooks and make sure that this is supported. So I encourage you all to check out the RedTide page if you can't come. But now I want to talk a little bit about how we can get youth from here to go. If you're a young person or you know a young person that would benefit from this conference and you really want them to be there, it's a big deal. It's a trip across the planet. There's going to be such a wonderful space for people to learn and grow and do cultural exchange and learn about how we can reconnect with one another. And so one of the things that we have done to try and help that and get folks from North America and other parts of the world to the RedTide Climate Summit is we are offering a chance to apply for a scholarship. So we're trying to build scholarships for young people to come out there, and we're doing this through an application process. And the application process is super easy as well. It's a little bit more in detail. We do have a lot of questions because we want to give this scholarship to folks and young people that are doing work in their communities, that are interested in this stuff, and how to get involved. So we'll be sharing this link to this Google form application so you can apply for a scholarship. The stipulations are you're a self-identified Indigenous youth, you're actively working on climate and Indigenous justice issues in your community, you have to have a valid passport and the ability to travel internationally, and be willing to travel to New Zealand by plane because there's no other way to get there. Sorry for those that have fear of flying. And you have to be able to attend the summit for the full duration. So that's really all. And then we go through some questions. We really want folks to really think about why they're coming and apply to the RedTide Climate Summit. Now, in order for us to fund more folks to come, because we have a small pot of money to help folks to come over, but we really want to grow that fund. So if you're interested in coming, we also want you to help us fundraise to get more money to make sure that more folks can come. So we're asking you to also think about the RedTide Youth Fundraiser. So this is specifically for scholarships for young people to come over to the RedTide Climate Summit in New Zealand. So we're asking folks to consider donating to help get youth delegates to this wonderful summit that Ora and her partner Ray and April and Hannah have been so diligently putting together. So take a look at this fundraiser to help us get young people involved. Donate to make sure that we can get more youth. The more money that we get in this, that means the more youth that we're going to get over to the summit. So if you're interested, remember, check out the registration form to apply as a young person to come over, and share the donation page so that we can get more folks to come out. And of course, I encourage you to take a look at the RedTide page and donate to make sure that all this stuff on the ground. If you are not a youth and you're not interested in coming, but you're really interested in supporting the summit, please donate online as well. We're going to have more updates on this on our website, on Indigenous Climate Action, as well as on our Facebook page, the RedTide Facebook page, and all the different summits together. So again, we really want to see more youth come out to these workshops, to these summits, to do that cross-cultural exchange and really stress the importance of this work, of both the folks in North America and the folks and our brothers and sisters on the other side of the planet. So we were going to open it up for some questions. I don't know, does Ray want to add anything? Maybe just introduce yourself, say hi. I did do an introduction to you, and I know you were off, but if you just want to say hello and welcome people to come to the summit.
Kia ora, everybody. I just wanted to re-emphasize the fact that, you know, we are coming to a very coastal community. There are some things that everybody will need to be aware of. For example, we do not have ATM machines, so you're going to have to bring money. We have safes here, so you can be protected of that if that's required. You do live in a communal, you will be in a communal environment, so it's really important to be prepared. Well, the food-wise, we've got a resort, we have a holiday park, and they close kind of 6 o'clock-ish. So, you know, be very prepared. Be very prepared, whānau.
Thank you so much, Ray. I mean, this is the thing. This is rural communities. My community is a rural community. So, you know, when people come up to Fort Chip, we're a fly-in community. And I'm always like, doors close at 6 and then you're SOL until the next day. So you got to be really, really prepared. And I'm like, bring sleeping gear if you're going to come camp out there. I think a lot of us know. I did notice that there was one Greg Paulson said he's not Indigenous to North America, that although he was born in Canada. This application form isn't just for Canadian Indigenous folks or North American Indigenous folks. If we have Indigenous folks that are anywhere on the globe that are interested in coming, you know, you can fill out this application form to apply to come as an Indigenous youth rep from wherever you are. And we will do our best to try and ensure that we can get scholarships for the Indigenous youth that come. I know that there was a question from one person on the Facebook that's from Heidi that said, will you be discussing how we might be able to provide reparations for those who have been affected by the destruction of climate change and fossil fuel extraction, especially those in the islands, including the minority communities in areas like Manhattan and Florida, and most especially in devastated areas of the tar sands extraction zones in Canada? So I think Heidi's asking, like, are these topics that we're going to be talking about at the summit? I don't know if anyone wants to answer that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great, that's actually a question that we should put in that summit, in that open forum session, like collect these questions, because part of that answer is a much bigger picture than just where do we find the sponsorship for that. It's about how do communities, because really what we're looking at is a pool of very limited resources in terms of finances, and we don't all want to be, we're all kind of vying for this. And so what we've got to reset our mind is around how do we create the cycle of generosity and resourcing within our own community, and that it's not always linked to the amounts of funds that we get. Of course, that's an important part of it, but that's only one of the picture. And so I think it's a really great question, and it should be on the platform. There's certainly people talking about community resilience, about different kind of programs and projects that are run in their communities that creates a more economic resilience. The reparation side of it, I think that is a great question to put in as within the summit space, because, you know, we will have, what the other part of that is creating your relationships with we have like regional councils, political, you know, people, those kind of ones that work in that forum of funding. But they work in the form of funding around economic development or creating community resilience of sorts. So it's really trying to find the same factor in your own communities and how you work with that within those relationship spaces. So it's a great question. It's a really important question. And as Hannah has kind of touched on, there's also an international space that needs to be occurring on a national and on a community spaces. So I think that's a great question to bring to the summit.
Thanks so much for that question, Heidi. And of course, reparations are always a big thing. You know, when our communities are the least to impact, as Hannah talked about, you know, we have the most low carbon lifestyles and contribute the least to climate change. And yes, yet we feel the impacts first and foremost and most severely. So when we talk about these reparations, it is really important to factor that into consideration. And the fact of the matter is, too, is most of these high intensity fossil fuels that are exacerbating climate change come from Indigenous territories and have been extracted without our consent and without any compensation to our communities and territories for decades, if not centuries. So there's a long history of the appropriation of our lands and territory, and that they're exploited for those resources that have led us and landed us in a state of a climate crisis. So these are all really, really important. I know that April wanted to mention another opportunity for youth in the Pacific Islands, so I wanted to hand it over to April for a minute.
Hi, it's not specific just to youth. It's also for, anyone that's really impassioned from the Pacific Islands, select Pacific Islands, to apply for funds. There's a few different ones that we've researched, and what we'll do is we'll put them onto the website and we'll put them onto the social media channels so that people can click in and see if they are eligible to apply for those funds, but they'll have to take their own initiative to go after those funds. But we'll put the resources out there as we find them. And if others have, ideas on where other travel funds might be to get to the summit, please share them with us, and we'd be happy to pass that on.
Thanks, April. I know that in Canada, I was talking with a young woman, her name, I just forgot it. Now I feel terrible. She's a young woman who's fighting for water in Canada. She's an Anishinaabe from the Thunder Bay, Manitoulin Island territory, and she was talking about hitting up the Assembly of First Nations in Canada and leadership to help get her over, because particularly young people under the age of 18, I just want to stress that you can't come over to New Zealand without a parent or a chaperone. It's international travel, so you're going to have to find travel for your parent as well. So I just want to stress that, and I believe her name was Amber. They were really looking into finding ways to get creative and making sure that they were able to attend, because they're really interested in this summit. And so I just wanted to talk about the fact that there are lots of opportunities. You can start your own little fundraiser if you need to, but do apply for a scholarship. Help us fundraise to build those scholarships for young people. We really want to continue to see this conference grow and see as many young people as we can out there, and not just young people. You don't have to be a youth to attend. There is a youth component. There's a non-youth component, so you don't have to be a young person. So if you are interested in coming to the summit, please do consider coming, and really looking at ways that we can get involved with sharing our knowledge systems across the planet and connecting. And again, as Aura stated, climate change and addressing climate change is going to be about reconnecting. And this is such a great opportunity to connect with folks that are on the other side of the planet, but really making it feel as though our issues are one and the same. I don't know if there's any other questions or if anyone has any dying words. I'm going to give a couple minutes. If anyone has any other questions, I'm going to check out the Facebook chat. I don't know if anyone from the group wants to say anything else while I scan for a few more questions. There doesn't appear to be any more questions and some really great comments. And we're really excited to, Indigenous Climate Action is super, super excited to not just be working in the confines of the colonial borders of Canada, but really working out with our brothers and sisters in other parts of the world. One of our main mandates is to build the tools and resources to build capacity of Indigenous communities here in Turtle Island. And it was so wonderful to meet April, to hear about the great work of the Pacific Peoples Partnership and Toitoi Manawa Trust, and the work that they're doing to build those tools for Pacific Island folks as well. And so we're really sort of matching our strategies and merging our issues together, because again, like Hannah stated, like Aura stated, like April stated, is we're not here to reinvent the wheel. We're here to build on the knowledge of our ancestors and make sure that those solutions are continued to be carried forward into the future when we're building the climate stable future and addressing the climate crisis we're all in. So I want to say thank you, Masi Cho, to Aura and Ray, to Hannah, and to April for joining us today and sharing your wonderful knowledge, beautiful work that you're all doing. And I really encourage you all to take a look at the RedTide Climate Summit page and join us in New Zealand in May. Thank you. And Masi Cho, everyone else, you can say goodbye as well. I think you're all muted.
Oh. Bye.
Bye, ka kite. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. It's been just wonderful. Looking forward to seeing so many of you.
Bye-bye. Take care, everyone.